The first of the 5 strands of math is number sense. So what is number sense? Number sense includes counting, understanding number relationships and operations in everyday life, such as comparing and also understanding what increasing and decreasing is. And the third one is simple addition and subtraction. Did you know there are 5 ways to teach counting? The first one is reciting numbers. This is when the child is repeating after you. It's a first step when you, as a class or with children, okay, let's count to 10. And then so you start counting to 10 and they repeat after you, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, but they're just reciting the numbers. Their understanding of what those numbers mean may not have taken effect yet. The second way of teaching counting is to have them recognize and name numbers. So you can show them a series of numbers and you can ask them to identify the number 3 and then they can correctly point to it. Or if you give them some numbers and you can just ask, what numbers do you see? And they're able to tell you, oh, 1 through 10. And so they can tell you what they see. So that is the recognizing and naming numbers. Another way of teaching counting is subitizing. And this is something where you just show the child a picture or just a certain number of objects for a very short time, and then they're able to tell you how many objects there are without counting. So for example, if you were to look at this picture and then I take it away, you're able to tell me there's 5 marbles, and I'd be, well, how do you know? And just, well, I saw it. And so that does take time, but that the child didn't have to count it. They didn't have to say, oh wait, stop the picture, I need to count. Subitizing is when the child can just look at maybe the pattern of the objects, but they're able to look at it and then just tell you right away how many objects they saw. The fourth way to teach counting is one-to-one correspondence. So this is when the child is counting out the objects. So they're understanding that as they are counting out that each number represents, or each object represents a number. So here you can see the child is sorting buttons, and so you ask them, okay, put one button or put the number of buttons in each carton or each space that you see the number for. So if they see the number 1, they can put 1 button, or if they are not reading numbers yet, you can say, okay, put 1 button here, and they can correctly count that out. Or up to like, okay, let's count out 5 buttons, and they can count out 5. And so that's a one-to-one correspondence, that they understand that the numbers are relating or they're referring to the objects. Cardinality is the 5th way of teaching a child how to count. And this is when the child understands that the number name of the last object counted presents the total number of the objects in that group. So if you look at these diamonds and you ask them to count this, the child can point to it and count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and you ask them, how many diamonds did you see? And they say 6, that they didn't have to start all over and count again. Because sometimes when the child is really young, they'll count again and they'll start all over. But cardinality knows that when they get to the number 6, that tells them how many objects they have. There are 2 more substrands under number sense, and I will show a demonstration here for those 2 substrands. The first one is understanding number relationships and operations in everyday life, such as comparing 2 groups of objects and then also increasing and decreasing. So for example, if I were to divide these cards into 2 groups, and then I ask the child, which group has more cars?
This group does.
And then let's see, and then which group has less cars?
This group.
Right, so now he's comparing the groups, saying which ones have more or less. And then let's talk about increasing and decreasing. If I say, okay, this is the cars that you have, if I were to take these away, do you have more or less than you started with?
Less.
Okay, very good. And then if I were to add 1 back, now do you have more or less than what you just had?
More.
Okay, good. So he is comparing, but then also knowing the vocabulary for increasing or decreasing the number of objects in a group. And then the other part of comparing is maybe you have 2 groups of cars, and then, hold on, when you have 2 groups of cars, and then now when we put them together, and then I'll say, okay, do you have more or less when you put them together?
You have more.
Right, because you put groups of fewer cards to make a bigger one. The second substrand that I wanted to demonstrate for number sense was just simple addition and subtraction. So here you have 6 cards. Now, if I were to take away 2 cards, how many would you have left?
4.
All right. Now, let's say one of the cards returns. How many will you have if I give back 1 card?
5.
All right. Very good. And then maybe I can also add on. All right. What if you gave your friend 3 cards? How many cards will you have left?
2.
Can you show me? All right, so then there's the 2. And then so just very simple addition and subtraction using manipulatives is a great way to teach these substrands of number sense. So you can see that number sense, even though it's very basic, is fundamental to a child learning just this first step in simple math.